So here we are in Salo, Italy, and we have a new crop formation up the northern part of Italy. I think this is a valid formation, and I'll explain as I get further into this video. If any of you have not followed me before, I urge you to please look at my previous videos, as there's some pretty interesting information coming through with this new kind of, I would say, communication, and it's on a very, very high level, and I'll explain this in full detail later. But here we've got some beautiful images in a field of what seems to look like, at first glance, it seems to look like just simple water damage or wind damage, and it can quite easily be mistaken for that. But if people have not been following the narrative with the crop circles over the last 2 years, especially since 2010 to 2012, then they won't know what they're looking at. Firstly, I'm very interested in some of the technical aspects of this crop circle. You have large areas that seem flattened, and you have other areas, smaller areas, that you would think would be universally flattened, or flatten the whole field if it was wind damage. And this isn't the case. Yes, it looks like wild patterning, and it looks a little bit chaotic, but myself being an artist, we also know that many artists know that communication can come in many forms, not just in sacred geometry, of which the crop circles have been doing for the last 30 years. This particular crop circle is interesting on a few levels, because we have the name of the place that it's come to in Salo, Italy. Well, Salo means salt. I'll come back to that in a minute, but here we see the actual, looks like some sort of a manor in which it appeared out in someone's yard. And here's some beautiful panning shots, so it's quite a large formation. Unfortunately, we don't have a direct aerial. This may turn up later in someone else's footage, but I'm hoping something else will come up with this. Now we move further south to a place called Rites, Italy, which is again another formation has appeared. This is the central mid-west part of Italy, and we see this again, a beautiful, what seems to be like a chaotic formation. There's a good overhead shot here, and so we can see that it seems to be like chaotic. Doesn't seem to be any message whatsoever, but this is again not the first time this kind of formation turned up. So here's another shot here. I'm going to show you a third formation in Italy that turned up about 2 weeks ago. And here, this is the third crop circle, or the crop formation that I'm interested in Scorgiano, Italy. The same month. This one was highly underreported. In fact, there was only one photo on Facebook that appeared, and I just want to thank the photographer for posting this, because I think they're very important. In regards, we've got 3 crop formations that all use a similar chaotic, what seems to be like a flooding theme. Now, to continue this narrative, we need to go back to Tula, Mexico, and back further to Krasnodar, Russia, of which I've already covered in a previous video. And here we go back. I'm going to take you back to Tula, Atlantis, Mexico, in the Tolteca region, and here you can see the same theme of flooding. Now, this particular crop formation was ignored by crop circle experts, or most crop circle experts in England, when in fact I thought it was actually a genuine narrative. Of course, it's only pure speculation on my part, but you can see the crop was actually well within boundaries of a geographical demarcation point, and here you've got the Russian version and a comparison here. Krasnodar, Russia, and Tula, Atlantis, Mexico. Krasnodar again turned up in 2011, last year. Here we can see the comparison between Krasnodar, Russia, and its counterpart in Tula, Mexico. And I just might say to the viewers that the Krasnodar Russian formation was just acreage. It was enormous, 4 to 5 acres, and the Tula Atlantis formation the same, 6 to 7 acres. And you can see the surrounding fields. There was no damage whatsoever to surrounding fields, which proves that wind just does not stop at the road or a hedge and not do any further patterning if it was wind. And incidentally, I checked out the wind reports for Krasnodar Airport during those days, those 2 days that it may have appeared, and there was average was 6 to 9 kilometers per hour, which would not do this kind of damage or this kind of formation. Here back in 2010 we've got what they call splashdown effects. Now these particular effects turned up either near or other crop circles or by themselves, and nobody really, you know, people call them dragon's feet and they gave them all these little names, and I just sort of looked at it. There was no real narrative at the time, so I just left it. I just thought, okay, you know, that's what you do with these things. If you've got a loose end, you don't try to tie it into anything until you actually get some sort of flow-on effect, some sort of cognitive connection to either a previous or a post crop formation or an event that's happened. So here you can see this beautiful, just beautiful soft flattening of the wheat here. As I mentioned earlier, one of the most intriguing factors about the Krasnodar formation was that it connected to an earlier crop circle, which was the Wollaston Grange crop circle in July 2010. As you can see here, that central glyph, which ended up having a staggering amount of alignments, up to 25 alignments coming out of its central symbolic focal points, emanating out right across the globe. So if anybody wants to see the narrative in that, it's pretty amazing, pretty eye-opening. Again, Krasnodar was the 24th alignment, and then you had Atlantis, Tula, Mexico, which I actually started to get some sort of a picture of what was going on in regards to flooding mythology and sociological unrest, of which I feel what this is all about. It's global unrest due to economic collapse. The other aspect of the unrest that I covered was earlier in my videos was that I had a narrative regarding the Wollaston Grange crop formation, which you can see here, which had 16 lines, which I attributed to the element of sulfur, and anybody who studies Kabbalah knows the link between sulfur as the element 16 on the elements chart. And here we have, 2 years later, we have a crop formation turning up in Salo, and Salo means salt in Italian, so it's kind of interesting. We've got that link going back again. Here we have this 2-year gap to Kabbalistic alchemy, and it's resurfaced again in that this crop formation has turned up in a place that is called salt. I find that kind of synchronistic. In Kabbalistic alchemy, you've got the 3 principles of mercury, salt and sulfur. As you can see, Aleph, Mem and Shin. What's interesting is when we look at the 3 mother letters, which is all to do with Kabbalah. If anyone who studies Kabbalah, the philosophic elements of air, Aleph, and you've got water again as Mem. So here we've got water themes coming in with these crop formations, and again it's going back to the element of water. These are very powerful inner elements of our mind, and I think they're talking about the collective archetype of water here, of our consciousness. So we're in for a lot of trouble, heaps of trouble. We only need to go back to 2010 as well, or 2011, I can't remember from the top of my head, that we had the crop circle at Poirino, Italy here, with the encoded name Enki, which was the god of water, or the lord of the waters. And of course it was situated right next to genuine crop damage, as we can see here, right next to the crop formation. It's touching it with one of its little arms, and across the road you can see genuine damage. So now the crop formations, or the crop circle makers, have decided to actually use this movement towards chaos as a narrative. Now the reason I say that we're moving towards chaos or sociological unrest is because back in 2010, 2011, here we can see there was crop circles that appeared in Indonesia, and they turned up or aligned up to a place called Mount Tidar, which was called the Navel of Java. and it had a connection to Islam. There was all these connections to Islam in the Middle East. So, and then of course 2 weeks later, after these crop circles turned up, we had the Middle East meltdown. We had all this sociological unrest. So this is moving very quickly now, and we've got all of the Salo, Ripi, and then Scorgiano, which we've seen now. We had Tula, Atlantis, Mexico, and we had Krasnodar, Russia. Before Krasnodar we had Wollaston Grange, and why I keep referring back to this crop circle is that of the 24 alignments, as you can see here in red, the yellow line you see there's going to Krasnodar, but the 23rd alignment went to Bohemian Grove in California, which is a well-known frequented holiday resort for the wealthy and the elite in America. So I linked 23 also. 23 is an esoteric number to death. So we've got to link economy and the symbolism of 23 to death. Also, with all these water themes, you'll have to see my previous video on rebirthing rites, which go all the way back to Egypt and prior to Atlantis and the collapse of the Atlantean Empire and its subsequent submerging under the sea. Again, we have the link to the waters, and so they're linking the Tula Atlantis Mexico crop circle to the collapse of Atlantis, which is a metaphor for our modern society. One of the more intriguing aspects, and this is on a final note, is it's interesting that the crop formations and crop circles in generally place themselves near clues. And you go to Wikipedia and you check out the city of Salo, and it was connected with what seemed to be an interesting play. It was called Salo, or the 120 Days of Sodom. I assume that's from Sodom and Gomorrah, from the biblical or the Hebrew version of Sodom and Gomorrah. It was a very controversial film in 1975. It was an Italian drama film written and directed by Pier Paolo Pasolini. Apparently he was murdered. It was based off a book called 120 Days of Sodom. We've all heard of the Marquis de Sade. When they which you know, the Marquis de Sade, well, the story is in 4 segments, it says, according to Wiki, and it was inspired by Dante's Inferno, which described the hell realms in the biblical hell realms. And they talk about the absolute decay of society into violence, sadism, sexual depravity, and you know, the film was banned in heaps of countries due to this. As I said, he was murdered. Pasolini, that was his last film. He was murdered shortly before Salo was released. But it's kind of interesting that this actually turns up now in the kind of the state of the world of things at the moment. You know, and they're talking about the film focuses on 4 wealthy, corrupted, fascist libertines after the fall of Benito Mussolini's Italy in 1944, who kidnap a total of 18 teenage boys and girls and subject them to 4 months of extreme violence, sadism, sexual and mental torture. The film is noted for exploring the themes of political corruption, abuse of power, sadism, perversion, sexuality and fascism. So it's kind of interesting that this turns up in Salo, Italy. And you've also the previous crop formation in Tula, Atlantis, Mexico, with its metaphor to Atlantis. So, I mean, it's definitely a narrative going on that someone's warning us about our behavioural patterns on the planet. And it's up to the viewer and the listener to judge for themselves where this is going, as we are all part of this society and the makeup of society. So I just thought I'd share that with you. Thanks very much for watching and listening, and stay tuned. There'll be more.